Mrs. Nانسي المغربي, Chairperson of Global Trade Matters. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mrs. Nancy. Now, before we shed light on the forum itself, I'd like to understand from you a little bit about think tanks here in Egypt and the importance of think tanks before we go into details about the Egypt-African Forum.
Okay, think tanks in Egypt, basically, or in the region, or in Africa per se, or in the world, you have an average of 4,500 think tanks. And when we developed the think tank, our think tank in Egypt, it was in 2005. And it was a very vague word to the market. Even in the English-speaking community, they were like, what is a think tank? What are you guys going to do? We don't understand. So we started translating it into Arabic, which is Hay'a Mufakkira. And we started focusing on 3 different programs. And this will give you what think tanks really do. Our first program was called Country Pairing Program. It was where you discuss and give awareness to the manufacturing sector or industrials of all the bilateral and multilateral trade agreements Egypt has signed with other countries. As an example, we have Agadir. It's between Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Tunisia. And how to use it? What are the rules of origin? People needed to understand. Another was the economic neighborhood policy. If you don't want to work with the Jordanians, etc., you can work with the Europeans. If you don't want to do that, you can have something with Libya, because Egypt has signed pan-Arab. We have so many trade agreements. We've developed over 35 different conferences for that particular program. The other is called Money and Finance. We discuss microfinance, how high the interest rates are. There has to be a law to regulate this interest rate for micro. Small and medium are deprived in this country. No banks are really focusing on small and medium. A lot of banks say that they have programs. They try to promote themselves as the small and medium supporters, but we've never really seen a live case of a small and medium that's going into a bank with his business plan and instantly getting the loan.
Because there are problems of implementing the mechanisms.
Definitely, yes. The interest rates are very high. That's A. B, a small and medium, if he's going to grow, he needs more venture capital than an actual loan.
Yes.
He needs somebody to work on his financials. Usually the papers are all over the place. He doesn't have the right lawyers, he doesn't have the right auditors, he doesn't have the right pitchers, the person that actually pitches and writes that business plan. If the banks want to do this, they have to create a unit that helps think tanks, that trains think tanks, sort of semi-incubate them. The third program we worked with was developed in 2009. All of these programs were in 2005. Investing in Egypt's green economy. We did know that we will have an energy issue. We did know that we were going to have a water issue. We were trying to push the private sector to go more environmentally friendly, pushing banks to create, even if he's giving a loan to a factory, ask him to have solar, ask him to create his own alternative energy. And that's where today, of course, everybody has electricity issues. If we would have worked then, it would have been different. And that's what the think tanks really do. Finding the problem before it happens, finding solution, forecasting problems, seeing what could be done to advocate with the government a certain law, handing it over to a lobby house, handing it over to a research center. So think tanks really should be working with lobbyers, research houses, and the media, because the media is the pressure group. And that's where we see the media is.
What
it's the
are
backbone.
The other programs that think tanks are working on here in Egypt?
I haven't found any, because a major problem in Egypt is students and the young generation don't see the career path of think tanks because they don't understand them. They don't understand that they could be advocating laws in parliament. They could be going to congressmen. They could be going to the presidency and advocating a certain thing, because a think tank could be developed in Upper Egypt just for solar, because we have sun. A think tank could be developed for waste. It could be developed for
special needs.
Special needs, it's very close to my heart, seriously. Because we found that there's a certain law, there are 2 laws actually. If you employ above 20 employees, 5% have to be special needs. Nobody was implementing it because they claimed that they weren't qualified. So we decided to create a school for special needs. So we had mental and physical handicap, and when we saw the mental could be educated, he would be finishing his high school diploma through an online program with a school in the US, So he's accredited by the high school. So no way with any university tell him no. They won't be allowed to. The mentally that weren't able to be educated and reach university, we taught them different vocational things, creating their own business. First we start with the token economy, of course, just for them to understand the money factor and the cost structure. So they'd be creating jewelry, rugs, and we would have them exhibit and actually participate in other exhibitions. We see special needs as a very high percentage in Egypt. We see that they're not taken care of, especially when it comes to the military. The boy reaches 18, he has to go to his التجنيد.
Yeah.
You have to facilitate him. You have to find a way where he can't be standing like the average person can. But there has to be something there. There's so much to be done. So many educations we would like to do for special needs. Okay. We had NGOs involved with us. We're working with an NGO now for a special program, for a special bank actually, to give them certain loans. The Social Fund of Development is also working on something, and they do somehow give a special loan with monitoring. He has to be monitored by someone. So there are other entities trying to do this. Okay. 14 million people.
As an organizer of the Egypt-Africa Forum, I would like to know from you more about the objectives of the forum. Of course, Egypt's policy, foreign policy, especially towards Africa, has started to change. The African file has been neglected for a long time, and this caused problems with many African countries, especially after Ethiopia decided to construct the Renaissance Dam. And there have been potentials to invest in Africa for Egypt. Now this policy is changing, and there is a very strong trend to cooperate or to boost cooperation with Africa. So how do you see the forum and in achieving such objective?
Okay, we developed this forum, and it's the 4th time. This forum took place 4 times before, 2006, 2007, 2008, and 2014. Actually, Egypt has never stopped investing in Africa, and that's where the misconception is. A lot of Egyptian companies invest in Africa. A lot of Egyptian companies have infrastructure projects like railroads, transportation, cement, energy. We're there. The point is they're very few. These companies, we can take them as a showcase and learn from them. What did they do? They studied, they went off, and they saw the need in a certain country. Africa is a continent, guys. I mean, and we're part of this continent. So it's not Africa and us. It's a whole piece of land that we all live on. The problem with Egyptian companies is that they don't really go off and do their market study. A lot of people yesterday in the forum would tell me, I want to export to Africa. Where in Africa? Do you know the need of that country? Africa is not a country. It's a continent. You've got Tunisia, you've got Tanzania,
North
you've got
Africa,
Uganda, you've got North Africa, you've got SADC countries, you've got thousands.
It's huge.
You have to do your R&D. The government is not going to do the R&D for you. It is not their role. It's their role when I have an issue that I want to export and I don't have shipping lines to go to Africa. I don't have airlines where I can reach my destination. I have an issue in my visa. It's the government role, and they've got to do it.
To facilitate.
They have to.
All the obstacles.
And the banks, because banks now are looking at Africa. We had one of the banks yesterday, and they have really proven that today they're using Egypt as a hub. It's a British bank, and using Egypt as a hub for Africa. And that's what we really should be promoting. Our problem is we don't promote Egypt in an appealing manner to the investor. From tourism to investment to private equity, you've got to be appealing. You've got to show competition is not between companies anymore. It's between countries. If you don't facilitate me in Egypt for my project, I'll go do it in Tunis. I'll go do it in Morocco. I'll go do it in Saudi.
Exactly.
I'll go do it anywhere. Egypt has to know that it is not the dominator anymore in the region, and this is something we all know. We've got to build that, and we've got to show that, yes, we are competing. Yes, we are able to compete. It could be for how qualified your manpower is, how qualified your blue collar is. 90 million people is not a bad thing, ala fikra. It's not, you should utilize your human resources.
China has billions of people.
Exactly. And what has China done? Today,
turn them into a productive force.
You have to. You've got to teach them. The illiteracy is 49 or 50%. even if that's the case, let's work on the new generation. A lot of countries did that in the past 30 years. Malaysia has shown its success. I'm not even going to give you the example of UAE because you can't compete, really. And a lot of countries in the region have really shown that. Even though, yes, Egypt was the dominator in the region until a certain point in time.
And it has all the resources and potentials.
You've got the mining industry alone. If you focus on your mining, you've got a lot of resources. If you focus on your sun, if you focus on your tourism, you've got so much.
Many resources.
You need to focus. Each ministry's role is not to have a hotel and run it. It's to regulate. Ministries, government should not own businesses. They should focus on their thing and leave the private sector to play their role.
Okay, is the timing of this forum related to President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's coming visit to Equatorial Guinea this week?
Actually, we knew 2 months ago or 3 months ago, we've been studying Africa for quite some time, but we knew Egypt's mandate right now was Africa. So we didn't know, of course, that he's traveling on the 26th, but we knew something is happening. So we created this forum just to show to the presidency and the government that the private sector has their back. It's not, the private sector will not let them go off and just do it on their own and then say, when the government does it, we're going to do it. That's why we showcased more than one success story of Egyptian companies in Africa yesterday. The point is to push more, to facilitate more, not through the government. I don't believe in the word the government has to do.
It's everyone's role.
It's everyone's. Nobody can do it alone. But the government doesn't put laws to restrict me برضو يعني. In the same time,
they have to be facilitators.
They've got to be facilitators, they've got to be regulators. They're not business owners, they shouldn't be. I mean, Ministry of Petroleum shouldn't have hotels or resorts, or the Ministry of Tourism for that much.
Yes. Okay, other than highlighting or showing the success stories of Egyptian companies in Africa, what were the main highlights of yesterday's inaugural session?
What I personally am proud of, the participation of the African media and ambassadors, and I have to thank our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They have shown the ambassadors that came that Egypt is welcoming them, Egypt is welcoming Africa. The relations have been cut for quite some time, we all know that, it's not a taboo hatta. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs really with the different ambassadors, His Excellency Gamal Bayoumi, His Excellency Hamzawi, all these ambassadors really showed how much it is supporting the Egyptian private sector to go into Africa. SIS, His Excellency Salah, he was posted in more than one country in Africa. He gave us a highlight of exactly what was happening there. So really the only ministry that I have to thank is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Okay, the forum is entitled Egypt is Africa's window on the world and the world's gate to Africa.
Yeah, Egypt is a hub to Africa.
Okay, so how can Egypt utilize its key geographic location and proximity to some of the world's largest markets to capitalize on the growth of African economies?
What are you giving that large one? What are you as Egypt first giving to that foreign investor, that Chinese manufacturer? For instance, he'd love to come to Egypt. It's so much closer, and transportation. Are you giving him the transportation route where his product would be less, where it's more cost effective for him to come to Egypt?
Or manpower.
Or manpower, or land, or energy. Build industrial parks, call them Chinese, call them African. Do you have the energy for them? So first, before we say that, we have to say, what have we got to give the international world to create Egypt as a gateway to Africa? Look at Jabal Ali. Look what have they done there. I'm not telling you go to London, I'm not telling you go to Washington or anything like that. I'm just telling you your next door neighbor.
Neighbors, yeah.
All right? So first, Ministry of Trade, Ministry of Petroleum, Ministry of Energy, all these ministries have to have one program. If we're working on Africa, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And then hand it over to the Ministry of Investment to promote it and get these investors in. But the minister is going to Africa, great, Minister of Trade. So basically he doesn't have the energy with him, so he doesn't know what's going to happen.
It's as if each entity is working alone. There is no coordination between...
I'm sure they've got meetings. I am sure they meet every day at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., whatever time they actually meet. But what sort of programs or facilitation or changing different laws and regulations to facilitate this investor that's coming in? local and
Based
international.
on overcoming the previous hurdles or obstacles. I mean, if there has been problems in the past, you should be focusing now on means of solving them.
The first
You
thing-
don't reinvent the wheel.
The first thing to solve the problem is realize that you have a problem.
Exactly.
What is the problem? And then from there you take it as a solution. The problem is nobody has really come up with one certain focus point into Africa. Let's focus on, we do know, let's say, Africa, let's say they're planting potatoes. So don't export potatoes. Export strawberry, export apples, as an example. Don't go off and give the country whatever they've got. See what the lack is. Plus, can you really, as Egyptian companies, compete with other products or countries in the African continent? Can you compete with the
So
Chinese?
this comes to step number one, which is investors doing their homework, first of all.
Doing their homework, qualifying themselves, qualifying their product. We all go shopping and you look at the jacket you're wearing, and if you see the Egyptian brand on it, automatically you'll be looking at the finishing. It's an automatic reaction in your head. All right?
That's true.
Not because we have the foreign complex, لو عودة الخواجة. No. It's because you as an Egyptian, خلاص, you know that everything is done right, and then he comes, that last button is not put correctly. So let's focus on blue collar. Qualifying our manpower is one of the most important things right now. Egyptian factories import from Bangladesh, they're importing manpower. That's ridiculous.
What about services, Mrs. Nancy? Do you think that services could be one of the sectors that could be well used in Africa?
In what type? IT services? Yes.
For example?
Yes, yes. But products, no.
Because you mentioned the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt has been developing itself really good in the past few years in the IT sector, but India has dominated this market.
And that's my next, actually, my next question to you.
You have to compete.
Can you compete with the Indian service companies there? Can you compete with all the foreign companies?
I think it would be Egypt's chance to do this in Africa.
There's a solution. If I can't compete, not really, it's not. If I can't compete, at least I can create my country, because of its geographical location, as a hub to these countries, to these investors into Africa. If I can't do it, let me facilitate others to do it.
Exactly.
I'll be making the same amount of money, pretty much. I'll be recruiting from my own people. They'll be working there, and
perhaps I'll be gaining the experience to compete later.
That's it. Yesterday we had an amazing IT panel, an amazing banking investment panel. Actually, they were all pretty good. Like, I can't just say one, but one of the things in IT, all of them said, we cannot compete with product. We can't compete with service, and let's get know-how come in. مش عيب to say I don't know how to do, that I need help. And that's just it. Either you create it as a gateway if you don't have that particular product or service up and running in your country, or you just stop, pause, and say, I just can't do it. Let me do more homework. Let me see how it could be done.
Okay, the forum has also invited the Asian economic experts, right?
Yes.
To support Egyptian, African, Chinese relations. So can you elaborate on this?
It's the same thing we're just saying. We're trying to, we had the ASEAN Egyptian Business Association there, our Asia Business Association, and what we were trying to show is Egypt is a gateway to Africa, not Chinese-African relations. That wasn't the point, because they have great relations already. The Americans they exist there, the Israelis exist there, the Libyans exist there for years, where you have ignored. And they've created an amazing, Indians, an amazing platform. And actually, the African countries started getting the know-how and creating their own companies, which is very important. So what we're saying here is, again, how can Egypt be the gateway? What could you give that Chinese factory, that Japanese, that South Korean, whatever, to have their business built up in Egypt and use it as a gateway?
Is this forum expected to issue some recommendations to fulfill all this?
The forum came up with, basically, there's a problem there, there's got to be resolved. We have to show Africa that we're interested and we're there. we didn't forget you guys, because you can hear it in certain sentences. You left us to the white man for years, and you're coming today, even though you're my neighbor. So what are you going to do? And they're not asking you to do much, على فكرة. They're not asking you to just go off, and they're asking you to win-win situation. Think of just exporting. Think of us as exporters and importers. What are you going to give me so I can give you? It's negotiation, it's business, guys. You've got to show what you can do, and you've got to show the other person, the other business community there, that they'll be making money. Export, import. خد وهات. Right.
Exactly. Well, that's very important issues that you have raised. Thank you very much for coming, and wish you best of luck.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
it's
you,
a pleasure
Mrs.
being here.
Nancy المغربي, Chairperson of Global Trade Matters. Thank you very much for sharing all this information with us.
Thank you so much.
And now we're going to watch a special report about sexual harassment, because up next we're going to be talking about sexual harassment, especially here in Egypt, as I mentioned earlier, a phenomenon that has been on the rise recently and means of solving it. We'll watch the report and we'll be right back to discuss it in details with our guests. Stay with us.